You know, when you picture a newborn baby, there's this immediate expectation of fragility.
Right, yeah.
You handle them like fine china, wrapped up in soft blankets, totally shielded from every sharp edge of the world. But when you examine the birth of Frank Sinatra, that delicate image just shatters instantly.
Oh, completely.
Because the entrance he made into the world in December 1915, it was visceral and, frankly, violent. He weighed a staggering 13.5 pounds.
Wow, which is practically the size of a toddler.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the doctors, they actually had to use forceps to physically pull him out. The procedure was so rough it left him with severe scarring across his left cheek and his neck, and it even punctured his eardrum.
Which caused lifelong hearing damage.
Yeah, lifelong. So he was quite literally pulled into existence, fighting for survival.
And that brutal entry, I mean, it really tells you everything you need to know about the psychology of the man. From his very first breath, he was marked by both trauma and resilience. And it sets a really profound baseline for the deep dive we are doing today, because we are pulling from this extensive biographical profile to decode a figure who has been, well, heavily obscured by his own mythology over the years.
Because the caricature is just so ingrained in our culture, right? We see the tuxedo, the fedora, the drink resting on the piano.
The swaggering lounge singer.
Exactly. But our mission today is to essentially dismantle that image. We are looking at how a scarred, bullied kid from Hoboken, who, by the way, was expelled from high school after just 47 days for rowdiness, how that kid essentially drafted the blueprint for modern pop stardom.
And that blueprint, you know, it wasn't just a musical evolution, it was a completely industrial one. His career acts as this highly sensitive seismograph for the 20th century.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Right, because he was at the epicenter of massive technological leaps in audio engineering, the birth of modern public relations, and shifting political power structures. He didn't just reflect American culture, he really engineered parts of it.
Which makes his starting point even more fascinating to me. Because before Sinatra, popular music was, well, it was primarily polite background noise for adults.
Right. Very tame.
Yeah, it completely lacked that youthful, dangerous edge. To become the phenomenon we know today, he had to invent an entirely new demographic of consumer. But he started from the absolute bottom.
Oh, yeah.
The source material has this brilliant anecdote about his first local group, the Hoboken Four. He didn't get in because he had the voice of an angel.
No, not at all.
He got in because he owned a Chrysler.
Yeah, he essentially bought his way to the microphone.
Exactly.
I mean, he was the only one with the car, so he just chauffeured the other singers to gigs. But that relentless hustle, it put him in the orbit of the big bands, specifically the Tommy Dorsey band.
Right.
Which is where that raw ambition finally met actual technique. Because Dorsey was a total master of the trombone, and Sinatra studied him like an academic.
Let's dig into the mechanics of that, actually, because it fundamentally changed how pop songs were sung. Sinatra would sit on the bandstand and obsessively watch Dorsey play these long, continuous, floating musical phrases.
Just ceaseless.
Yeah, Dorsey never seemed to take a breath, and Sinatra wanted his vocal cords to replicate the smooth glide of that brass instrument. So he starts swimming underwater in public pools.
Right.
Holding his breath and thinking of song lyrics in his head just to stretch his lung capacity.
And the technical term for what he was chasing there is legato, meaning singing in a smooth, flowing manner without breaks between notes.
Which is new, right?
Totally new. Previous singers had a very staccato, bouncy delivery. It was heavily influenced by vaudeville. But Sinatra's diaphragm training allowed him to sing straight through the bar lines of the sheet music.
Wow.
He wasn't constrained by traditional pauses. He could sustain a vowel sound and bend a phrase so it sounded like this intimate, uninterrupted plea. He really smoothed out the sharp edges of popular music.
And the cultural reaction to that smooth, intimate delivery was sheer bedlam. I mean, this is the birth of the Bobby Soxers.
Yes.
And what the press called Sinatra Mania. You look at October 1944, he plays the Paramount Theater in New York. The first show ends, and only 250 people actually leave the building.
They just refuse to give up their seats.
Right. Meanwhile, you have an overflow of 35,000 teenage girls waiting outside who suddenly realize they aren't getting in. And it triggers the Columbus Day riot.
It's wild.
You literally have tens of thousands of girls smashing ticket booths and stopping traffic in Times Square.
Because the devotion was absolute. And in many ways, it was terrifying to the establishment. I mean, girls were writing his song titles on their skin.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were bribing hotel maids to let them sleep in his unmade bed. They were literally ripping his clothes off in the street.
Which is exactly where I think the traditional narrative of Sinatra fails us. Because when you picture him, you think of an adult entertaining other adults in Vegas.
Right, the Rat Pack era.
Exactly. But this 1940s hysteria, this is the exact same psychological mechanism driving modern K-pop,
Yeah.
or the Swiftie fandom today.
Oh, absolutely.
He was the prototype for the boy band sensation, decades before the Beatles even arrived at JFK Airport.
Though I would push back slightly on framing it purely as a psychological reaction to his voice. We really cannot ignore the engineered mechanics behind the hysteria.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, it wasn't entirely spontaneous. He had a publicist named George Evans, who was an absolute pioneer in manufactured hype.
Top PR strategy.
Exactly. Evans understood that the press needed a narrative. So he deliberately framed Sinatra as a vulnerable, frail Italian-American kid from a rough neighborhood who was underfed and basically desperately needed mothering.
Oh, so he weaponized vulnerability.
Precisely. Evans even went so far as to pay girls $5 to sit in the front row and scream.
Wait, he paid them?
Yeah, he paid them to scream or fake fainting at very specific moments during a ballad, and once the first few girls screamed, the crowd psychology just took over. The genuine hysteria eclipsed the manufactured sparks. It was a masterclass in manipulating consumer desire. They didn't just want to date him, they felt this proprietary need to protect him.
But the cruel reality of the entertainment industry is that teen idols always have an expiration date.
Always.
You can only play the vulnerable boy for so long before the audience grows up and moves on. By the early 1950s, Sinatra's career was in a complete tailspin. And this wasn't a graceful decline either. It was a devastating crash.
It really was a systemic failure across his entire life, and the emotional toll began to manifest physically, too.
The medical details are honestly grim. He suffered a submucosal hemorrhage of the throat.
Yeah. And to put that in context for you, that means the extreme stress and vocal strain caused blood vessels to literally burst and pool beneath the delicate tissue of his vocal cords.
Oh.
For a singer, it is a catastrophic injury. It threatens to permanently destroy the instrument.
And you add to that physical breakdown a highly publicized volatile affair with the actress Ava Gardner.
Which destroyed his marriage.
Right. And his traditional, family-oriented fan base abandoned him in total disgust. He was dropped by Columbia Records. His talent agency let him go. He was even hit with a $200,000 tax bill he couldn't pay.
Just a complete free fall.
He went from 35,000 screaming girls in Times Square to playing a 1,200-seat venue in Chicago where exactly 150 people showed up.
Which forces an artist into a corner. When the artificial machinery of celebrity breaks down and the screaming stops, you are left with whatever raw talent you actually possess.
Yeah.
He could no longer rely on the boyish charm. He had to evolve into a man who had lived, suffered, and lost.
Which actually makes me think about the modern pop landscape, where an artist almost needs a highly publicized, devastating breakup to fuel their masterpiece album.
Right, the breakup album trope.
Exactly. Was Ava Gardner the catalyst that finally gave his voice gravity? Like, did extreme heartbreak essentially fix his artistry?
Well, it's a compelling narrative, but I'd argue heartbreak alone doesn't create masterpieces. I mean, millions of people suffer terrible breakups and never produce art.
Fair point.
The real magic happened because his emotional devastation collided with a radical new technology, the 12-inch microgroove LP.
Oh, let's explore that collision. Because before this era, the public consumed music on 78 RPM discs.
Right.
Which held maybe, 3 minutes of music per side?
Exactly. There were these thick, fragile shellac discs meant for disposable pop singles. But the new 12-inch vinyl LP rotated slower at 33 1/3 RPM, and it used microgrooves.
Okay.
This allowed for up to 20 minutes of high-fidelity music per side. Crucially, vinyl had a much quieter surface noise than shellac.
Meaning you could hear more detail.
Yes. This meant Sinatra could utilize the microphone differently. He could whisper, he could let his voice crack with emotion, and the listener could hear every single breath and nuance.
And he capitalized on that longer format brilliantly. Working with his arranger, Nelson Riddle, at Capitol Records, he realized an album didn't have to just be a random collection of radio hits.
No, it could be cohesive.
Right. Because of the LP's length, he could sequence the songs to tell a story. He organized them by mood and theme. You look at an album like In the Wee Small Hours from 1955.
Such a classic.
It is entirely composed of melancholic torch songs, designed specifically to be listened to at 2 a.m. when you are nursing a broken heart and a glass of bourbon. He essentially pioneered the modern concept album.
He took the darkest, most humiliating period of his life and packaged it into a perfectly curated aesthetic experience. He gave the listener a sustained emotional environment, and the public rewarded him for it.
Yeah, combined with an unexpected Academy Award win for his dramatic acting in From Here to Eternity, he clawed his way entirely back to the summit of the industry.
The ultimate comeback.
But this leads us to the most complex part of our deep dive today. Because once he regained the throne, he refused to ever be vulnerable again. He didn't want to just be a star. He demanded to be a power broker, the chairman of the board.
Which is where the causality of his career becomes so fascinating. His massive success at Capitol Records gave him the financial independence to break away from the traditional Hollywood studio system.
Right.
And once he had his own capital, he began to leverage his cultural gravity across domains that entertainers traditionally avoided.
And he operated in this web of contradictions that are honestly almost impossible to reconcile today. Let's examine his underworld connections.
Okay.
His godfather was Willie Moretti, a known underboss in the Genovese crime family. In 1946, Sinatra attended the Havana Conference, which was a major mafia summit.
Right, alongside mob boss Lucky Luciano.
Exactly. He was constantly monitored by the government, to the point where the FBI maintained a 2,400-page file on his movements.
That is massive.
It is. He even had his Nevada casino license temporarily revoked because the notorious Chicago mobster Sam Giancana was spotted at his property, the Calneva Lodge.
So you have this undeniable entanglement with organized crime. Yet parallel to that, you have to hold an entirely different reality in your head. His fierce, relentless activism for civil rights.
Yes, exactly.
He used his immense leverage to force the desegregation of Nevada hotels and casinos in the 1950s and 60s.
Which was unheard of at the time.
Totally unheard of. If a venue refused entry to black patrons or forced black performers to enter through the kitchen, Sinatra would threaten to pull his shows and lead boycotts. He even played a major benefit concert at Carnegie Hall to raise funds for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
It's like studying a cinematic antihero. You have a man carrying the weight of a massive FBI file for associating with mobsters, who is simultaneously championing racial equality and hanging out with the President of the United States.
The whiplash is real.
And to be clear for you listening, we aren't taking a stance on his personal politics here. We are just examining the sheer, unbridled scope of his influence.
Right, exactly. Just looking at the facts.
Because his relationship with political power was just as volatile as his personal life. Early on, he was deeply entrenched in Democratic politics, ardently supporting FDR and forming a really close personal friendship with John F. Kennedy. I mean, he even organized JFK's inaugural gala.
They were very close until, of course, the political realities of Sinatra's lifestyle became a massive liability for the White House.
Oh, the helipad incident.
Yeah.
It's the perfect distillation of his ego. So Sinatra was expecting President Kennedy to stay at his compound in Palm Springs, and he treats it like a royal visitation.
Oh, he goes all out.
He spares absolutely no expense, going so far as to construct a private helipad on his property specifically for Marine One. But at this time, Attorney General Robert Kennedy is aggressively prosecuting organized crime. And he tells the president, "You cannot be photographed staying at the home of a man who associates with Sam Giancana."
I mean, the optics would have been disastrous for the administration.
So JFK abruptly cancels the visit. And the twist, he chooses to stay at the nearby home of Bing Crosby instead.
Oh, wow.
Bing Crosby, who was not only Sinatra's biggest musical rival, but a Republican.
You can only imagine the seismic blow to a pry as fragile and inflated as Sinatra's.
Oh, he was completely unglued by the perceived disrespect. He actually grabbed a sledgehammer and physically smashed his own newly constructed helipad to pieces.
Which just perfectly reveals the psychology of his power. He demanded loyalty and respect above all else. When he felt betrayed by the Democrats, he didn't just quietly step away.
No, not his style.
He threw his entire cultural weight behind the opposition. He later aligned himself with the Republican Party, raised millions for Ronald Reagan's campaigns, and eventually received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from him. And again, looking at this impartially, we aren't judging the ideological shift itself. We are observing how Sinatra weaponized his celebrity. He demanded a seat at the table, and if you denied him, he would simply build a new table somewhere else. He shaped the world around him using his fame as a battering ram.
But, amid all that noise, the Hollywood glamour, the mob summits, the sledgehammers, the presidential galas, it is incredibly easy to lose sight of the actual craftsmanship.
The music itself.
Exactly. With all this chaos, why do music critics still revere him as the premier vocalist of the 20th century.
Yeah.
What was the underlying genius? Because this is a man who famously never learned to read a single note of sheet music.
Not one note, but he possessed what the classical musicians he employed described as a terrifying sixth sense for audio arrangement.
The source material has a detail about his studio sessions that is just astounding. He would be standing in a recording studio, completely surrounded by a massive 100-piece symphony orchestra.
Just a wall of sound.
Right. You have violins, brass, woodwinds, percussion, all playing simultaneously. And amidst that noise, Sinatra could hear a single fractional bum note being played by one specific musician hidden in the back of the room.
That's insane.
He would stop the entire recording session, point to the exact chair, and have them fix it.
And think about how difficult it is to communicate that correction when you don't speak the technical language of music.
Right. He couldn't use the jargon.
Exactly. He couldn't say, you missed the B-flat diminished chord in measure 42. He had to lead entirely by ear, communicating in emotion, color, and timing. He was this obsessive perfectionist who intimidated classically trained prodigies because his spatial memory and tonal recognition were just flawless.
And that obsession wasn't just musical. It permeated his entire environment. Even back in his early big band days, his bandmates mockingly nicknamed him Lady Macbeth because he was so fanatical about cleanliness.
Oh, right, the constant showering.
Yeah. He was constantly showering and changing into pristine outfits. He demanded absolute perfection from his environment, his collaborators, and most harshly, himself.
And I think there's a really profound takeaway here for you, the listener, or anyone trying to master a skill. Sinatra proves that true mastery does not always require formal institutional education.
You don't need the traditional credentials.
No, you don't need to read the sheet music if you possess an obsessive, intuitive grasp of your craft. It's really about putting in the unseen hours to develop your own internal compass and holding yourself to a standard that borders on exhausting.
It is a rich irony, isn't it? The public saw this combative, tough guy who got into physical altercations with journalists in parking lots.
Right.
A man who navigated the treacherous waters of mob bosses and politicians. And yet, before the microphones turned on for a recording session, that same volatile man would spend an hour completely isolated at the piano, just vocalizing by himself.
Preparing the instrument.
Yeah. He would agonize over the tender, microscopic delivery of a single lyric to ensure it carried the exact weight of a broken heart.
He was a man of extreme extremes, casting a magnificent and, frequently dark shadow over the entire century.
He truly did. Let's pull all these threads together. We started with a scarred kid, pulled into the world by forceps, fighting for his first breath.
Right.
We watched him use sheer hustle to infiltrate the big bands, where he literally weaponized breath control to change the rhythm of pop music. He partnered with brilliant PR minds to invent the concept of the teenage idol.
And then lost it all.
Yes, and when he lost it all, he used the technological leap of the microgroove LP to invent the concept album, transforming his heartbreak into high art. And then he used that wealth to become an uncompromising power broker, forcing his way into the highest halls of power.
It really is the definitive arc of the modern superstar.
But I want to leave you with one final, deeply ironic nugget from the sources to mull over today. When you think of Frank Sinatra's legacy, one song instantly comes to mind, My Way.
Oh, of course.
It is his ultimate signature tune. It's a defiant, unapologetic anthem about living life strictly on your own terms, facing the end without regrets. In fact, it remains one of the most frequently requested songs at funerals today.
It feels like the absolute perfect capstone to the myth he built.
But here's the fascinating twist. Privately, Sinatra completely detested the song.
Really?
Yeah. He complained to his inner circle that he hated singing it. He felt the lyrics were arrogant and boastful, and he worried audiences would view it as a gross, self-aggrandizing tribute.
Oh, wow. I had no idea.
He didn't want it to be his defining statement, yet the public demand was so overwhelming that he was basically forced to sing it at almost every concert for the rest of his life. It became his anthem against his own wishes.
That is incredibly ironic.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. We've spent this deep dive analyzing a man who exerted colossal, often ruthless control over his art, his image, and the culture around him. But in the end, can any of us truly control our own legacy? Or does the audience, the people who watch, listen, and remember, ultimately rip it out of our hands and decide who we are and what we mean to the world?